I don't usually make more than one video about a particular subject. I just like to get everything wrapped up in one go. But I will make an exception for digital ID because it's such an important topic and we know that there are going to be updates over the next 1, 2, 3 years. And in this video, there are some updates and actually they're quite positive. But before we get into all of that, I wanted to respond to something that Asmongold said when he reacted to my first video. He said that digital ID is basically inevitable at this point. And look, I'll just play the clip so I'm not misrepresenting him.
In my opinion, and this might be an unpopular opinion, I think digital ID is inevitable, but digital ID and people's worry about it is a symptom and not a disease. The disease effectively are the laws that digital ID will make it easier to enforce. So what I mean by that is that the real issue is that, for example, digital ID isn't going to stop somebody from saying that I like ice cream. It is going to stop somebody from saying something that could go against the UK's speech laws, for example. So really the focus should not be, because I do, and if you want to fight and resist against digital ID, I respect you, more power to you. I think it's completely inevitable and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Sorry, that's my opinion. That being said, I do think that there is an ability and a possibility to change the laws.
I know that this is a position Asman has held for quite some time. The idea that digital ID, or real ID as he sometimes calls it, is inevitable across the whole world. But let me just offer a counterpoint here. With so many things in life, there is a first mover advantage. And what I mean by that is, if you're the first person to develop or embrace a technology, then you have a competitive advantage. If you're the first person to develop the rifled barrel and then you go to war, guess what? You've got a big advantage. If you're the first person to harness nuclear energy, great. Your country's going to do fantastically when it comes to industrialization. But I do believe that there's also sometimes a last mover advantage, or a no mover advantage. And if digital ID really is this thing that's going to be pervasive and be introduced across all of these countries, why would we go first? Or why would we rush headfirst into it? Why wouldn't we just wait, sit back for a couple of decades, and we can monitor how these other countries implement digital ID and how those governments actually use it, or, as I suspect, abuse it. And I think that that's the most sensible thing to do. You can sit back, let the other European countries take it if they really want to, if they're not willing to put up a fight. And if their governments start abusing digital ID against their citizens, then British people can look at that and go, oh, actually, remember what France did with their digital ID? Remember what Sweden did with their digital ID? Yeah, I don't want any part to play in that. So look, my point is this. There is basically nothing to be gained, or very little to be gained, by rushing into this, and there's potentially a lot to be gained if we can force the government to stall and postpone these plans. So yeah, I am going to keep fighting. Okay, back to the main topic at hand, because there have been a few updates. Now, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, was in India a couple of days ago for trade talks, and whilst he was there, he delivered a press conference. One of the journalists asked him a question about digital ID. And take a listen to his answer, because he's not talking about preventing illegal working anymore.
Here in India, I think it's 1 billion people have digital ID. It's been taken up on a voluntary basis in huge numbers, not least because it means that you can access your own money, make payments so much more easily than is available with others.
He kind of said the quiet part out loud. Indians are using their digital ID to access their own money, not government money, but their own money. And if you think that's scary, it's a lot scarier in Britain, because in India, digital ID is actually voluntary, which means there must be some other way that Indians can access their own funds, right? But Keir Starmer wants it to be mandatory. He wants everyone to have a digital ID, which means that, in theory, it may come to pass that you need a digital ID to access your own money in a bank account. Not good. And then when you start thinking about the more draconian implementations of digital ID and what that could mean, it being connected to all your social media and everything else, you start to realise that this is looking pretty totalitarian. Citizens will feel as though they have to behave, they have to comply with whatever the state says, just so they don't get cut off from their own funds, so they don't just get debanked in a heartbeat by the state. That's pretty terrifying. It's not a world I want to live in. And it might sound really conspiratorial, but Tony Blair is obviously one of the key figureheads in pushing digital ID. And he did I don't really know what you want to call it, like a conference, I guess, where he was speaking to Larry Ellison. And I want you to take a listen to what Larry Ellison, one of the world's richest men, was saying about citizens being on their best behaviour if the state is watching them at all times. Because this just sends a shiver down my spine. I don't like to hear this at all.
The police will be on their best behavior because we're constantly watching and recording everything that's going on. Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on.
When you come to government...
At this point, you might be in a total state of despair and thinking back to the introduction of this video when I said that there were some positive developments. So where are they? Well, the first one comes from a pretty strange place, Palantir. For those who haven't heard of Palantir, they're basically a tech company for governments. If a government wants to build something digital, Palantir will probably be involved in some way, shape or form, whether it's consulting or building it or trying to win a contract. It's the kind of shadowy corporation working for governments that breeds conspiracy theories, and honestly, a lot of them are probably true. So you would imagine that digital ID in the UK would be right up Palantir's street, right? But no. They've come out against it. In fact, they've gone even harder than that, and they've said that Keir Starmer is undemocratic for trying to implement this. Yeah, weird. Take a listen.
These proposals to introduce a new form of digital ID in the UK are ones that we have been widely linked to online. So many people are talking about Palantir's involvement with that programme, and I want to say that we will not be participating in that.
You will not? So tell me why.
Well, it's actually, the answer is on a couple of levels. One is I have actually personal concerns about digital ID. That's both on a technical level. I think there are other ways of addressing the challenge that we have with engaging with government services online. I think there are ways to improve that wouldn't require a wholesale new form of ID. And I think it does open up the risk of misuse as well. But also, it's a problem on a corporate level. So Palantir have long had a policy that we will help democratically elected governments to implement the policies they've been elected to deliver. And that does mean that often we are involved in the implementation of very controversial measures. However, digital ID is not one that was tested at the last election. It wasn't in the manifesto.
Yeah.
So we haven't had a clear resounding public support at the ballot box for its implementation. And as you said, we're seeing a wide divergence of views and a lot of controversy around it. So it isn't one for us.
It is a sorry state of affairs when a private corporation like Palantir is seemingly a defender of civil liberties and democracy against your own Prime Minister. But ultimately, he's correct, isn't he? This was never tested democratically. This wasn't in a manifesto. And this is a very controversial topic. Even if you look at the polls for popularity, which have fallen dramatically, probably thanks to people like me making videos and Asmund Gold reviewing them. But even if you look at those polls, I don't think they reflect the true nature of how much people don't want this. Because the people who are like, sure, bring in digital ID, they're kind of nonchalant, right? They're not screaming from the rooftops about how much they want digital ID. Whereas the people who are opposed to it, well, they are vehemently opposed to it. Anyway, the good news just keeps coming for Keir Starmer, because a couple of days ago he did an online workshop to try and reassure his own MPs about digital ID, but they were not reassured.
And they were told that there would be meetings with number 10 officials, government ministers, to basically explain to them what digital ID cards are all about, how they would work, what the thinking behind it is. And a couple of the MPs who were on this call were basically just sort of tearing their hair out, messaged me to say they're planning these meetings to try and win us round. It's not going to work. If anything, it's going to harden opposition to it. Now, I spoke to another Labour MP who wasn't on the call, but he said, basically, he described it as number 10 having a reverse Midas touch. The
reverse Midas touch is a beautiful description. Keir Starmer is so universally disliked that every time he endorses a policy, that policy immediately becomes less popular. And it's got to be hard to try and govern a country when you've got that effect on you, right? That's one hell of a spell to be wandering around with, but I don't really care. In fact, I'm thankful. I'm glad of it. I am glad that the globalists and that Tony Blair decided that Keir Starmer was going to be their vessel to push digital ID, because had they actually waited for someone more competent, more well-liked, they'd have had a better shot of getting this through. But with Keir Starmer, I think we've got a real chance of beating this. So, hey, When your enemy is in the midst of making a mistake, do not interrupt them. Folks, I'm not saying that the war is won, because it isn't. I'm just saying that the war is winnable. We have to keep up this pressure against digital ID, because even for those people who think that Keir Starmer is trustworthy, you're mental, by the way, but even if you do believe that, you don't know what every government for the rest of your life in this country is going to look like. You really, really don't. So how can you want to give the state basically unlimited power and control over your life and over all citizens when you don't know what the government or the politics is going to look like in 20, 30, 40, 50 years? It just doesn't make any sense. So we really do have to resist this. It's kind of the fight of our lifetimes. One of them anyway, because we've been left with a few, unfortunately, by our politicians. That's pretty much all I've got for you. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like, comment and subscribe. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you in a future video. Thank you very much.